Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Spiritual Spotlight series. I am so excited today because today we have Jamye Price. She is the author of Opening to Light Language and the Cosmic Consciousness Ascension Deck. She's an energy healer, channel, and a teacher. We're also going to be talking about her amazing new classes coming out soon on the Shift Network, Learn to Channel Light Language. Jamye, thank you so much for coming to the Spiritual Spotlight series. I'm so happy you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So excited. So, Jamye, can you maybe take us back to the beginning? How did your journey into energy healing and channeling first begin?
So, I always like to start with letting everyone know that I was not a psychic child. I was a sensitive child, but I wasn't even that aware of that at that time. And my psychic senses started opening up, actually, as it turns out, around 1987 when I was 17. And so it was the harmonic convergence, which I knew nothing about at the time. And it just was a slow opening at first, but it would be things that were provable. Like I would hear something in my head, so and so is going to be there when you arrive. And it would be someone random that I had not spoken to or thought about, sometimes even in years. And there they would be. And so I was just like, wow, that's weird. But I couldn't control it. I couldn't make it happen or not happen. And then eventually things like that got more frequent. Other things started opening up, like my clairvoyance, and things progressed even to me doing energy healing, which began as an impulse that I just thought, I woke up one day, I wasn't feeling well, like almost like I was going to get a flu or something. And I just had this impulse to hold my hand over my body, and it would get just a couple inches away. It would get warm at certain spots, and I would stop there and I would see in my mind's eye like this gray energy leaving. And then I would just empty my hand. And all of that was like, I had no context for it. I didn't know why. I didn't get a message, do this. It just was an impulse. And over time, and then I kind of took a nap a little bit, and then I woke up and I was feeling fine. And so over time, I was like, when my friends or family would say that they were sickly, I was like, well, I'm going to try that. And they didn't know anything about it at the time because I had no idea what I was doing or if it would work. And then eventually I recognized more of my psychic senses, that I was seeing people's auras. I was seeing how they would connect to each other. Sometimes, like if I would see two people walking by, or I would feel their emotions. And then I recognized that my guides were talking to me. So I became obsessed with energy healing, and I started doing that. I would tell people what I was doing, and I would have friends that would come over and I would work on them. And it just grew from there. And then I would have them lay on the massage table with their eyes closed. And, I would just do whatever I was being guided to do. But in the early 2000s, I had an axiotonal alignment, and that amped things up to another level. So I'd had these waves up into that point, and then that was just another wave. And it was after that that the light language started opening up. And at that time, I was accustomed to people on the table with their eyes closed and everything was silent. And I was having a conversation with my guides in my head. And they would teach me about things that were going on, or they would say, go over to this side, and then they would show me things there. So with the light language, it just started to like twitching through my body at first, and that got bigger and bigger. And then eventually it was this hand movement all over their body. And I was fine with that because it was silent. Their eyes were closed. I was like, hey, this is awesome. And my guides would talk to me about what was happening, but they wouldn't just lay the whole thing out for me like, this is light language. This is what the path will be. Da, 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 da. I had to trust and I had to discover. And I also had to get over a lot of fear and judgment because eventually the sound started wanting to come out. Yeah. And I kept that suppressed for a very long time because it wasn't known back then. No. There just wasn't that much out there about it. And there was a little bit in some books. There was a little bit that I would come across, but it was really this whole journey of trusting what was going on, which I did because it came in a healing environment for me. But I didn't trust that I was safe to just let it flow. And so support systems came in, and some of them were people that did light language that was just random meetings because there wasn't many people doing it. Some of it was friends that were just supportive of what I was going through. And all of that was helpful. And then, of course, finally, there came a time where they kind of pushed me past my comfort zone. And it all came out in the perfect public setting when I was doing
Right.
another class. And that was kind of that final piece that pushed me over some of that judgment. And the rest of the ways that I had some of that judgment that I was still working through, those were easier in comparison. But after that, I was like, oh, I don't need to hold this back. And
Right.
then many years later, started sharing it on YouTube and then started teaching it. And
Right.
so now it's been over a decade that I've been teaching it to people in depth, and well over 2 decades that I've been doing it.
That is amazing. And for somebody that maybe is brand new to light language, how would you describe what it is and how does it bypass a logical mind to work directly with the soul?
Yeah. So, light language is just a unique form of channeling, and we're all channels. We all just channel in different ways, and light language is one of those ways. And it's just a form of nonlinear communication. And we're also familiar with that. Like, I always like to use the example of what does this mean? It's nonlinear communication
Yeah.
because you have to interpret what that means. Am I
Right.
annoyed? Am I holding back from you, or am I cold?
Right. Right. So true.
Yeah, you have to interpret some of what that is because it's a broader
Mm,
context. So, light language is just nonlinear or multi layered communication. Now, the reason that it bypasses our mental constructs is because we use our linear mind to define and figure out the linear realm. And the light language itself, whether you're transmitting or receiving it, it's not using your direct language centers. So you're using more of the limbic system of the brain, you're using more of your emotional aspect of the brain. And so that's how it bypasses those mental constructs because we don't have the linear to linear verbiage to go, oh, I know how I feel about the word love. It brings up all this wonderful context. Or,
yes.
oh, when I hear that tone of voice, I bring up this other context. We don't get to do that with light language in the same way. And so it bypasses those mental limitations and it speaks more directly to our multidimensional body or multi-layered body, and emotions are like that. They're vast
Yeah.
instead of just one little linearized thing.
So when you were first channeling, you worked with the Larian guides and you developed crystalline soul healing. What was like your first experience communicating with these multidimensional beings?
So for me, channeling was something that I was reticent to do. It wasn't something that I felt very comfortable with. And in the early days when I was doing sessions, I would be I was fine getting the messages and conveying them and dealing with energy healing and things like that. But them just coming through me, I wasn't real open to that. And so every once in a while in a session, they would just burst through me and I would start
Oh,
yelling something at the client and then I would kind of pull it back. So it took me a while even to get accustomed to channeling in English. But that guide contact for me, once I started recognizing it, was something that just felt so sacred and special, like a loving parent kind of relationship where there's this teaching and support that happens. But I do have teaching guides. And so they don't just coddle me. And if I'm like, well, why is this happening? Or what about this? If it's not something that they're like, oh, that would be an empowering situation to give you the answer, then, not that I'm on my own, but that's for me to discover.
right.
So it was this really beautiful, sacred relationship to me. And as they taught me about healing, part of that was about light language, which is an externalized form of multidimensional communication. The other aspect of it was crystalline soul healing, which is a completely
Mm,
different modality. It's a Lyran template modality. It's silent, there's no movements or sounds, but it works through that vast set of template instructions.
Yeah.
And so it's just another form of energy healing.
So cool. That is so cool. How do you maintain balance and clarity when you're channeling such high frequency energy in your daily life?
One thing is you definitely need to get used to what your body needs,
Mm,
because when we're doing energy healing, whether we're giving it or even when we're receiving it, I like to remind people you're going through change, even if you can't see it. So you need to take care of your physical body and support it through that. So it's like building endurance and recognizing what your body can handle. So you want to be aware of how you're feeling with that. And then that can help you through all of the other things that you're dealing with so that you're approaching everything from more balance. To me, it's become such a part of my life that everything that I'm experiencing, I always have that observer hat on that's like, oh, what is the energy flow that's happening here? What are the lessons that are coming up? So it becomes a part of every day. And also, you need to know when to step back from that kind of intensity and just let your body integrate and let yourself be fully human in this multidimensional experience that we're having, which is the new normal.
it's so true. So you have spoken about ascension and humanity's evolution. How do you see your role in guiding others to the shift?
So it's one of those things that as soon as I heard the word back in the early 2000s, I was like, "Bump, that's what I'm doing. That's
Wow.
connected into
I love
everything
that.
that I'm doing and going through." And I was just, that's the route. So for me, it is part of helping us to recognize that this is natural to us, that we can be grounded, we can be fully human, and integrate our divine multidimensional nature. So, my role in that is helping us to understand it and apply it into our regular life. And I do a lot of things that are pretty far out there. The light language, especially in the early days. I
Yeah.
love how much it's grown now. But in the early days, that was very fringe. And now it's growing because we're changing our whole vibration. And this kind of thing is going to keep naturally happening more and more. People's intuitive senses are opening up more. The capabilities for channeling light language, channeling in English, it's all opening up. And so teaching people to work with energy is a big part of my passion with that. That's why I teach two completely separate modalities in depth, because energy healing to me is an everyday part of life.
Yes.
And so that's my biggest passion with this. And I just absolutely love teaching.
And she's a very good teacher. As someone who has taken one of her amazing courses, she's an excellent, excellent teacher. And she offers a safe space, and it feels very open for you to really like hone in on your spiritual gifts. So I do want to talk about your new course that's coming up soon, Learn to Channel Light Language. And you do teach, there are different ways that light language can come through us. So, speaking, singing, writing, and signing with our hands. What makes each form unique in its healing and activation potential?
Yeah. So some might just do one form, some might do all four. And it doesn't really matter because they all have their own special flow, and the uniqueness of what we feel drawn to is what's important. But in this class, Learn to Channel Light Language, which I've been teaching for over a decade
Long
now,
time.
yeah, I like to go through every form. And frankly, I force you to do
She
every
does.
form.
Yes, she does. The spotlight is on.
Yes, yes. Now, I don't force you to do that all by yourself in front of everyone.
No.
We do everything as a group, but I force people, I say that in the nicest way possible, to do every form because it's just fun to have that experience. And then that gives you that full spectrum of experience to then go, oh, this one really flowed for me, or this one didn't, and that's
Right.
okay. I kind of like this one, but this one I don't really like. And just to have that experience, because you never know how life is going to unfold.
So
And I've
true.
had students in my own personal experience where I was like, ooh, that's not natural for me. That one doesn't go so well. And then sometimes it becomes like your best form a year or so later, or 2 years later, or it'll happen every once in a while, and you'll have something so magical with it that you're like, whoa, that I wouldn't have expected that, because it's not typical for me. So I like to take everyone through each form, because they all have their own special thing. When we vocalize and we are speaking, we're in an entirely different mental state than we were if we were singing a song.
So true.
That's a very different vocalized state. And so to have that experience with both of those is very helpful. It's the same with the written. That's something that we have a lot of emotional and mental connection to, because the written word has a lot of history for us. So to write light language, it's a quieter experience. And so you're in a slightly different brainwave state than you are when you're vocalizing.
Yes.
And so that puts you in a whole different state of experience. And then, of course, movement, whether it's through your hands or using more of your body, which is all possible with light language, that's such a core part of being in the physical realm. And it's a completely different experience than the other ones. So I like to take us through all of those so that we have that full spectrum of experience to then practice from.
And I like how you said that. It is kind of interesting because you might go into the course thinking, oh, this is going to be strong for me to do it this way. But then this way is really what pops out. And from my own personal experience, I thought speaking it was going to be my jam. I find writing it is more of my jam. And I find in times of stress that I will be in my personal life, I run a doctor's office as my job. I'm a registered nurse. I run a very, very busy doctor's office. I find myself in times of stress, I just start channeling it and writing it out. And then it's like, I'm brought back to that peace. So, and I don't necessarily have to know where it's coming from. I think that's another thing we get held up on. Like, well, what does it mean? What is this? And, so I'm going to ask you a question after that. But I find it brings me back to peace. So for those that maybe are looking for how to define the light language, how do you help them to kind of overcome that feeling of, well, if I don't know if it's coming from Syrians or Palladians or my own light consciousness being, how do you kind of, and I've been able to reconcile that through Jamie's teachings. How are you able to help people through that?
Yeah, yeah. So it is something that it takes a certain amount of openness, and it takes a certain amount of patience, and also a certain amount of practice to get through. And we go through a whole lesson, actually early on in the class too, on how to translate light language, because it's not what we are accustomed to.
Right.
When we hear words, or we hear something that even sounds like words, beep, bop, boop, then we're like, well, that must be a word, or it sounds like you just said a sentence, so it must translate like that. And it's not always so linear. Even the things like we would expect, well, who is this? Give me a name. I mean, now we know, but that used to be something that was pretty common. It's like
Yeah.
one name for who you are channeling, and it's not always that linear.
Right.
So just to recognize you're channeling a group took people quite a while to go, it's not always so linear like we expect.
Right.
So that kind of patience and relaxing into it and building a foundation of safety within your expectation, that's something that I go through in class, because all of those are important, so that we recognize that we're not just open to any old energy, and that we're not like scared and shutting off our
Right.
channel, or
Right.
we're not too rigid with I have to know or else,
So true.
because part of this is meant to be a discovery. So that's a whole section, again, early on, that I take
Right.
us through. to establish that safety and that foundation so that the translation and the recognition becomes more natural and it becomes part of it.
Right.
And that's what we are doing is we are expanding our ability to understand the subtle realm
Mm.
and blend that here with the physical realm. That's what our ascension is about. That's what this evolution point is about, is that clarity and consciousness with the subtle realm that has different rules than the physical realm.
So true. And you kind of touched on this a little bit. So, what kind of energetic preparation and support is woven into the course to help participants open up safely and confidently?
Yeah, so we start there with the first lesson is establishing that safety and getting clear on what our intentions are and clear on what we are open to and what we're not open to. So I start us through that process with those intentions and activations from the first class on. And then we work with them through the entire class, which I always recommend people do, and even continuing beyond that until you recognize that they're basically templated into your system, that they're part of who you are, and that intention of clarity is your intention.
And it almost becomes like after you get this into your daily spiritual hygiene practice, it does become second nature. Like, whatever is coming forward and your protection. And it definitely becomes very much like it's a daily part of living, which I like.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's part of the beauty of the bridge of light language. And even the energy healing that I do,
Yeah.
like crystalline soul healing, it teaches you different things because it's not vocalized or things that we are accustomed to with our communication. What light language does is it gives us that clearer bridge of how we communicate. And we blend that multidimensionality into the communication. And just like I gave that example
Yeah.
of,
Which
what
is
am
a
I
great
mad or am I
example.
cold?
Yeah.
Yeah. That it's honing that skill of discernment that we all have, but it's bringing it in on that deeper level. And that's part of what our ascension is, more consciousness and more clarity with those subtle realm rules. And so light language gives us such a beautiful bridge with that to understand communication on a multidimensional level. Because once you start experiencing it, then you're honing that skill of looking beyond the words, looking deeper into things, having a fuller experience. And that's what's so exciting about these times, and sometimes so frustrating because it's really up for us to have more and more discernment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much energy that's coming on the planet right now, and it's making us a little intense. And it's a little much. So even today, I had to remind myself that I need to ground, protect, pull in. This is okay. This is just a moment. It's very like it's intense. And I would be curious to see if you feel like it's going to get even more intense, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, that is what I feel. It's we're in this time of a lot of change, and change is challenging for
Yes.
many people. And depending on what the change is, you're going to feel some of that in your own life, and then you're going to feel some of that collective energy.
Right.
And so it is, and honestly, 2020 started teaching us some of these better boundaries of I need to focus on what's within my control. I need to focus on my energetic and emotional and mental health
So
so that
true.
then all of my interactions are coming from empowerment as best I can.
So true.
And dip your toe in those other areas for a little bit of knowledge, but don't let yourself saturate, because those things that are outside of your control, this is our time to really focus into our own lives because we're always interacting with others, and recognize the power of our information flowing into this realm as well.
So
And
true.
so we're fighting against less, but we are not just ignoring it and retracting or contracting from it. We are flowing that information and then dealing with our lives from empowerment. So it's a really interesting intensity and a time of really strengthening the sensitives so that they are
Yes.
using their beautiful light.
Yes. Oh, I love how you just answered that. Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So for those that are probably now experiencing a spiritual awakening or rapid energetic shifts, how can light language serve as a stabilizing and integrative tool?
Nice. Yes. Oh, it's such a beautiful one. One one thing that's so nice about it, and this was my big challenge to get over, that when I had that one time, it's in the book, where my guides kind of pushed me into like doing light language in public, essentially, which they did tell me I was going to do, and it burst out of me in a class that I was doing. Well, one of the people came up afterwards and said, I'm glad that that comes through you like that, because it kind of comes through like a storm, and I get to see that something happened. And that's something that I love about light language, is because it's externalized, whether it's silent and it's written, or you have movement that happens, or something vocalized, it's reinforcing for you that life is communicating to you and through you at all times.
Mm.
And it's very healing to be immersed in that expansive state. And so when you are sitting and thinking about something, or you're meditating, or you're setting an intention, and you're like, I'm going to do some light language about this. It might be something in your own life. It might be something for a friend. It might be something that's going on in the world, but you're getting your energy into this realm. And that's
Mm.
something that my guides, Ariane, the Lyrans that you were talking about, the Lyran Council of Time, they say that continuously. Get your energy into this realm, light worker. That not just letting life happen and getting frustrated and spinning with that. Observe it. I like this. I don't like this. What do I want? Well, I'm going to put that into this realm. And I can do that with light language. I can do that in plenty of other ways as
Right.
well. But light language is such a beautiful experience with that, because it's visceral for you.
Right.
And that creates healing. It creates movement in your life. And it's not about fixing things, even though that is often the effect. It's about flowing your intentions here, and then life responds to that. So it's just a beautiful healing experience to
Right.
interact with, and sometimes wildly fun.
I think that's amazing. And I think another beautiful part of this course is that there's actually a community aspect of it. So how does peer practice deepen the learning experience for those that are attending this live course?
Yeah, so this particular course it's your own personal journey with light language. It's you strengthening all of your forms of light language, and then having that practice within that community. And then there's a Facebook community that's connected with this, because one of the things that is very helpful with light language is meeting people of like mind, so that you don't just silo out afterwards and then it kind of fades. Not the capability, but your trust and your experience with it can, depending on the type of person that you are,
Yes.
if you don't have some community that's reflecting for you and keeping that alive within you. Now, not everyone needs that. Some people are just naturally, they're naturally going to self-start and flow even when they're alone. But that community aspect is a really important one.
It is.
And so it's great that the Shift Network also has a Facebook group that goes along with this, that those of you that have taken class, you have people
Right.
to communicate with and share with and experience with and practice with. It's very helpful.
I love that. And you're so is so true, because to be with like-minded people that are sharing a shared experience, when someone shares and someone sees that, then they're like, "Oh, then I can do this too." It's
Mhm.
such a powerful thing that, we lose track of at times, you know.
Yes.
So you've mentioned that light language affects our DNA. Can you maybe explain how this multidimensional communication interacts with our cellular and soul structure?
Absolutely. So our DNA is physical. We know that. But we also know that there's an interdimensional aspect to it or a multidimensional aspect to it. And they used to call that junk DNA, and it was over 90% of it. But now they call it non-coding DNA because they know that it does something and they uncover a little of that, but they can't always define what our DNA is doing. Well, our DNA is very malleable, and there's been plenty of experiments that have shown that it is affected by our intentions. Another way of saying that is affected by its environment. So if we only drank soda and ate chips all day long, every day of our lives, we are putting our body in a certain environment. Our DNA will respond to that, just like all of our cellular structure will. So beyond that physical environment, we have a mental and emotional environment, and that's been studied enough now too. Believe it or not, I remember when that was not very accepted in the Western world, that stress has a genuine effect on your body. That
Yes.
finally it was more admitted, like, of course. So I love that that has changed. But that's the mental and emotional effect or your intentional, in fact, effect on your DNA. And so light language communicates like that as well, but it has that multidimensional aspect that is a much more fuller, layered communication. And your DNA is like that as well. It's constantly reading its entire environment, not just the physical cellular environment.
Right.
It does more than that. And so light language speaks directly to that. And as my guides say, subtle speaks directly to subtle. And so when we are doing light language, we are shifting the environment of the DNA. We are creating healing. And I always say that, the word DNA activation, of course, we hear a lot about it, but really all it is a shift in the DNA that naturally opens up a greater expanse of capability, things like intuitive senses or healing capabilities, channeling light language, and other things. So when you're doing light language or even just receiving it, that subtle is speaking directly to subtle, and the DNA is immersed in a new environment, and therefore it reacts to that environment. And so the healing energy of light language will offer that healing to the DNA and create that change. And anytime we're in a change state, the DNA is affected. So if you have a moment of forgiveness, then you've changed your environment. Your chemical reaction is different, and that changes the DNA.
Wow, I really like that. And I like that you also talk about like the subtle energy. And I know like I myself also I do energy healing and we work with the subtle bodies, like our energetic states. And I really like that subtle talks to subtle. And that's you're reminding me like, oh yeah, that's right. you know, it's so important. And I think also, and I think you'd probably agree with this, like everything that happens to us is embedded into our cellular tissue. And then it responds to the change, whether it's neutral, positive, negative, for whatever we're putting inside of all of our energetic bodies, because we have multiple energetic bodies. I find that
Yes.
fascinating.
Yes.
You're like, yes.
Yes. And and that's what's so exciting about this time is we're becoming more conscious of it, and it's expanding so much. There's even more studies being
Yes.
done. There's more places where people are
Yes.
talking about this. There's some surprising ones and some ones that you're like, wow, that's so awesome. So it's going to keep going in that
Yes.
direction. This is natural evolution, and it's bigger than us.
And I like, and I'm sure you do too, because you've been doing this a long time, that now science is starting to back up all of this energy healing, light language, sound healing. Like, I love that science is now like, here's the evidence.
Yes.
That to me is
Yes.
like, woo.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's just even recognizing that I remember when it was so controversial that Deepak Chopra, mainly at the time, was saying your body is affected by your emotions, and then Dr. Lipton and
Right.
Candace Pert, and they started reinforcing that, and more people, and now it's everywhere, and I just love that. It's happening quickly in many ways. Even watching the expansion of light language, I knew that was the way that it was going to go because this is natural to us
Right.
and it's available to all of us. Anyone can do this. It's going to expand because we're opening up that multidimensional communication more and more. We're in an environment of it
Hmm.
because not only is that the time frame that we're going through, the space that we're physically going through, but we are all opening up more and more, and then that creates more of that environment in the field of information here on earth. And so it is a time of blooming, like a spring for humanity.
Oh, I love that. It is. And I like that we're recording this in spring. So we're honoring the
Yes.
seasons. So
Yes.
before I ask you the last question, if you wouldn't mind, would you please be willing to share a little bit of a light language transmission with us, if you wouldn't mind?
Absolutely.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. So let's all, I'll talk you through how I normally talk people through this. So everyone just take a nice, relaxing breath. And we're just going to allow whatever's for your highest good and for you to feel comfortable. I'm not doing anything to you. This is not something that just comes through in one way, it comes through in a vast waveform. It's your higher self that densifies it or makes it specific for you. So your higher self is choosing what you will release and what you will activate. And then just another nice, relaxing breath. And as I'm transmitting the light language, just see what you notice. Mbrero tumna krayat unup sanchero tumnema. Broma kramdat ansu koret tilerten hatut grayarumat mnameshut tayowa. Haramderuk okwarbat krormand inem mon sharakreab atut umdamd kriet lele ramdert ananasut uam. Tamorim neer sukram shayr blebt halert num bramahkrir met nem hauret and grand dat eer tenende such am dorokrael renen hano wa saru harmtariat warashtayru matsu kramaham sharup tamtan primah kram taptim wat tap kronum tat imam kramah patam chapta da tiak mehani anarut kwa urma rormat o kwa sumcharu kararupta Dorat hatu dat krorup tipt pramham kraurum taptiorum taptiarat al duranten shukrodum danden ormdum do erkred takred numtai. Smasham taptis no tiny. Herum dam tat krir talernend. Kanasaram Taiwa. Good. Another relaxing breath. And you can gently rub your hands together if you like. Rub your hands in your legs, move your body. Just bring yourself into a more active brain state. Good. Good.
That was beautiful. Thank you. I could feel it. The energy came in. It felt like a heart opening, and the lights were changing, and just everything. It was so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing gift.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. That That was an interesting one because in the beginning, there was this very soft energy. I could feel a lot of Pleiadian connection with that one. And my hands went right to my third eye, and they were doing stuff with the third eye and all around this whole heart head connection. And then at a different time, maybe midway through or so, it changed. It was a different energy, and there was a
Yeah.
lot of clearing happening during that time. And then right at the very end, again, this soft energy came through. Oh, there was one time where I could feel this other energy that was very connected with Egypt.
I felt
And
that.
then,
I
yeah,
did. I was
right
like,
at
are
the,
we in Egypt?
yes, that was wild. And that was towards the end. And then at the very, very end, my hands were just kind of held here, like in a, almost like seeing a bubble. And then I could see a lot of gold coming off the face. And then I saw a lion.
Wow.
And that to me is a connection with the Lyrans.
Yeah.
But when I was seeing that gold coming off the face, I felt like what they were doing was, I don't quite have good words for this, but it was almost like helping us to be able to emanate more naturally, like it's just coming off of our face.
Love that. And like you said before, to speak the your energy into this realm. So it's almost like it's helping us to get this out into this physical realm.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Thank you again. And I have one final question. For those that are listening who may be curious, but maybe nervous to begin, what practical advice would you give someone who wants to start exploring their intuitive gifts or light language today?
So, one, there's plenty of places you can see or hear some light language. Like I have a YouTube
Yeah.
channel where I put lots of light language up there. And then, my book also goes into a lot of detail, not only of the meta science, because I don't do that in the class. The class is very experiential. And the book gives you a lot of that background, and it
Yes.
gives you some exercises to start playing with it. But I still would say come take the class
Come take the
because
class.
yeah, that is I love that you brought up the sacred space because that is something that is so important to me. That this is an experience of like-minded people. I understand all the nerves and everything that comes up with it. I'm well versed in that. And so the whole class is set up to be this supportive push, to get over those hurdles in a
Right.
fun way and a very supportive way. Because whether you only ever do light language by yourself and for yourself, and you never do it publicly, you are drastically changing the energy that we are all immersed in. That was one thing that was made very clear to me early on in the class. And it used to make me so verklempt because they would show me why that is, that how important it is for each of us to truly get our energy into this realm. And it's not about going out there and forcing things, or even that you have to verbalize that to someone else. That can be a very personal thing, but it makes a huge difference. In essence, it's each of us committing to our own improvement in all the myriad ways that we might do that with energy healing of all kinds of
Right.
forms, or journaling, speaking up or not saying anything when it's the wisdom choice. All of those things are so important. And yet, light language is such a fascinating and expansive way of doing that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And she does really have a sacred space for those that may feel awkward, uncomfortable, embarrassed. You really like get pushed out of that energy and you go into expansiveness and grace and just openness. And it's just a beautiful journey. And I'm really excited about your upcoming course. And
Thank
Jamie,
you.
I want to thank you so much for coming on the Spiritual Spotlight series. Is truly has been an honor to speak with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for the opportunity.